Well, to discuss this and much more, I have energy expert Charles Majumi joining me via Skype. Good to have you join us, Charles. Now, that report, that's a 29 September 2019 report, saying that NNPC recorded 45,347 pipeline breaks on its downstream pipeline network between 2001 and this year. What's your reaction to this and the need for Nigeria to employ international pipeline technology and security systems?
Thank you very much. First of all, I think we have to understand and contextualize the enormity of the issue. Nigeria has over 5,000 kilometers of pipeline for refined products, 4,000 kilometers of pipeline for crude oil products, and 164 kilometers of pipeline for gas, and similar distance for condensates. Now, I'm sure you would understand and agree that it's an enormous undertaking to supervise that type of infrastructure successfully, especially given the incidence of crude oil theft in order to feed the illegal refining issues that are going on in the country today. So what government must do in order to stem this flow, and by the way, this translates into about a total loss of about $41.9 billion, which hits companies as well as NNPC directly. What the country must do is look for innovative ways to prevent this. In my view, we have to look at it from a molecular marker perspective. In other words, just like with diamonds in the Congo, you have a Kimberley process, where if a diamond is extracted illegally or through bloodshed, it's certified, it doesn't receive the kind of certification that allows it to be traded on the international market. We should put in place similar kind of certification process that will enable crude oil that is stolen from pipelines to not be traded so easily in the international market. And so what this will require is a global partnership between traders, refineries, regulators, and international groups to do that. That's on the global level. I think on the local level, what government needs to do is increase community stakeholding so that the communities through which these pipelines run have some sense of ownership that will incentivize them to defend it. I think also we need to design stiffer regulations for those who would break these pipelines for whatever economic benefit they are seeking.
Now, Charles, let's just talk, having all of these huge pipeline assets to properly cater to them, it's a whole lot of difficulty, especially looking at operational efficiency because of these vandals. But like you rightly mentioned, we have to look at community engagement and ensuring that there's a sense of ownership. But we've somewhat seen a reduction in the tide or in the wave of vandalism, wouldn't you say? But still a harsh reality. So what the current results we are having now, is that enough to say we are in a safe zone?
No, it isn't. I mean, these things, as you know, can flash up at any time. I wouldn't be 100% sure in agreeing with you that the incidents have totally gone down. If you look at the rise in the incidence of illegal oil refining in the Niger Delta area, this is directly in correlation to pipeline vandalism. I mean, the whole reason why these illegal refineries are so profitable is because they get their oil for free. They're not paying for the crude oil. So my sense is that it's still something that must be dealt with and tackled. I think the other thing that we always tend to ignore is surveillance technology. Currently, you have these pipeline security contracts that are going out. Often they entail arming local militia types to protect swaths of pipeline going across the country. I think that can be quite a dangerous pathway. I would much more be, because what you're doing effectively is you're arming local groups of people who could turn against you, or could in fact, and as we're seeing, be instrumentalized to actually vandalize those pipelines, very often so that standby engineering firms can get the contracts to repair those pipelines. So one has to be very, very careful. My inclination is, like I said, more towards putting some kind of molecular marker system so that we can differentiate between stolen and non-stolen crude oil, and at the same time deploy surveillance technologies, drone technologies, such early warning systems, and increase our rapid response capability through the military and other such forces.
Now, Charles, let's also talk about improving on domestic gas utilization to improve the power generation in the country and also boost industrial growth. Over the years, we've not necessarily put our best foot forward in this regard.
We haven't, and I would say to you that let me give you one indication of where we're getting it really wrong. Okay, most recently I saw a study where a group of consultants were able to analyze the economic and financial impacts on the national economy of taking the gas that we are using for Train 7 LNG, which is pretty much gas that's going to be exported out of the country, over if we had taken that gas and we had fed it into our domestic economy, what would the impacts have been? Well, 1.27 billion cubic feet of gas going as export would have created 4,000 jobs. Whereas if we had taken that same amount of gas and put it into the national economy, through direct and indirect employment, we would have created millions of jobs, which would have gone a long way into creating our own internal energy and national security. One of the big problems we're facing in this country is the problem of a booming population. When the population booms and we're not creating jobs that are commensurate with that population explosion, there is a high potential for internal security problems. Unemployed youths are a big and dangerous problem. So yes, we must, I'm not saying that LNG is a bad thing, we must rebalance our thinking with regards to how we choose to utilize our energy resources. Rather than exporting that gas so that other people can add value to it and create jobs in their own countries and create the value chains and the multiplier effect and the GDP impact on growth, we must internalize our own energy resources, add value to them, thereby creating jobs, okay, and giving employment to our teeming masses of people. This is going to require substantial policy focus and substantial government will. So I'm crying out to them to do that. Of course, our power situation is also there. All our power stations are gas-fired, okay? So we require gas to fire them. We must change the way we view our energy resources. We must internalize them. We must create jobs. We must power our industries. So I'm all for that, yes.
And the NNPC also says that it's in the process of establishing two new 200,000 barrels per day condensate refineries to boost refining capacity. But first and foremost, let's look at the state of our current refineries and then looking at our debt profile as well, budgetary deficits and much more, external reserves dropping. Do you think this is a feasible project at this time?
No, it's not feasible if government is going to be doing it. I don't think government has any business in those types of activities. Look what they did sadly, to the refinery. And I'm not just blaming this government. This is a perennial problem. Look what they did to our refineries in the course of running them. Look what happened when Indorama took over a polypropylene facility that never operated at full capacity for one day. Within a year, the private sector was able to turn around that refinery and make it into probably the golden child of Nigerian polypropylene refining. So I don't believe that government is going to do any more than it's already done. I think that now what government needs to do is step back, enable the right fiscal and regulatory policies to encourage investments into those sectors in this country at this time, with the understanding, however, that global capital or global molecules, hydrocarbon molecules, are competing internationally for capital. Okay, Nigeria is no longer the golden bride that it was. In fact, Nigeria is only a member of a growing harem of women. And to be frank, she's not even the youngest member of the harem. So she's got to try a little bit harder than everybody else to get the attention of the global financiers.
We have to be strategic. We have to be intentional. I get your point. Now, before I let you go, Charles, let's also talk about global realities and how that also defines our oil and gas sector. Now we look at OPEC meeting, OPEC Plus meeting that was held this month. We're looking at oil cuts as well. It's when we're talking about excesses. We've seen oil prices also trade quite well. Brent and at the OPEC baskets faring quite impressively, $65 per barrel. We also had the warning from the IMF saying that if prices ever drop to $50 per barrel, Nigeria will go into a recession. What are your predictions for 2020? 2019 is virtually done. What are your predictions for 2020 and how we should manage our oil and gas sector moving forward?
You know, it always astounds me, and I'm an energy expert, that Nigeria is so fixated on crude oil when the entire world is moving beyond crude to renewable energies. Very soon, okay, now the reality of the global market is that Nigeria is not the supplier it was just a few years ago. The United States has developed energy independence. There is a very robust shale oil and gas revolution going on. There have been new discoveries of crude oil and gas all over the world. In regions of the world that have greater, more efficient geographic proximity to our off-taker markets. Oil is a thing of the past. We have to diversify our economy and look beyond it, or we will drink that oil very soon. Look at Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco, one of the largest IPOs in history. Nearly a $2 trillion IPO. Saudi Aramco, one of the largest oil companies of the world, have declared that they're looking beyond oil. We can't keep going through this repetitive process of going down when the oil markets are high, are low, and praying that something will happen to change the nature of global energy economics such that our cost for a barrel of oil will remain high. It's ridiculous. We have to think beyond oil because that's where the world is going.
But Charles, I'm curious to find out now, let me just butt in here. Why are we not looking away from oil and gas? You rightly mentioned Saudi Aramco as well and the steps that they're taking. And we see our Minister of State for Petroleum Resources and other key stakeholders. They're not necessarily thinking in that line. And diversification of the economy, well, we're still at infancy stage. What's the issue here, in your own opinion?
I can't, while I can't speak for what motivates particular individuals within government to believe what they believe, all I can say is that I don't believe that government is really thinking effectively in the long term.
But they are not blind to the global trends.
Sure. But I think before you can diversify your economy, you have to take certain steps, which not just this government, but many of their successors have been very slow to do. People are not just going to show up here because you want them to. They're going to look at your incentives compared to other countries' incentives for the same investment. We have had a petroleum industry bill that has languished in the National Assembly for close to 18 years, while all others, in all other realms, in geographic proximity to Nigeria, they have passed theirs. Look at what happened in Ghana. Look what's happening in Uganda. So unless you give very clear fiscal terms, nobody is going to come here. You can't come to a place where there is uncertainty. You can come to a place where there is risk and you can model that into your business plan, into your business model. But if there is uncertainty, why do I have to come? So in order to do the things we need to do, it goes beyond government proclamation. The government needs to take action to ensure that the fiscal incentives are in place, the regulatory frameworks are in place, and that government is committed to a program of diversification in the long-term interest of this country.
Thank you much for your time, Charles. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. We've been speaking with Charles Majami, energy expert.